My name is Marina Hale, 32 years old. Thanksgiving has always felt like walking a tightrope in shoes that don't fit, but that year, the rope felt thinner and the shoes felt smaller than ever. I had just finished a night shift at the hospital, 12 hours of alarms, IV pumps, and the metallic scent of antiseptic and blood clinging to my skin. I drove home as the sky was barely turning gray, took the fastest shower of my life, scrubbed until the hospital smell loosened its grip, and then stood in my tiny kitchen staring at the sweet potato casserole I'd promised to bring. I could barely keep my eyes open, but I wrapped the casserole anyway, like I always did, like I was still trying to prove I was a good daughter, a good sister, a good something. By the time I pulled up to my parents' house, my eyelids stung with sandpaper fatigue. The driveway was already full. My dad's car crooked at an angle, my mom's SUV nosed too far to the left, and my sister's beat-up sedan parked in the only decent spot like she'd done something to earn it. I balanced the hot casserole on my forearms as I walked up the path, the November air cold enough to make my lungs ache. Mom opened the door before I could knock, her voice too bright. "There she is," she chirped. "Our little workhorse. Did you bring the sweet potatoes? Oh, good, everyone loves your sweet potatoes." She said, "Our little workhorse," like it was a compliment. Inside, the house smelled like turkey, cinnamon, and that specific tension that lives in families who refuse to admit anything is wrong. Dad was already on his third glass of wine, face flushed, laughter half a second too loud. The TV in the living room played some football game no one was actually watching. My mom fluttered around the kitchen, telling me about a woman from her Pilates class who used to model for toothpaste ads in the 90s. And then there was Alyssa, 28 years old, head-to-toe beige in a matching loungewear set she definitely couldn't afford, slouched at the table scrolling on her phone. Her life, as far as Instagram was concerned, was a curated highlight reel of brunches, yoga retreats, and long story rants about how misunderstood she was. The reality was, she hadn't held a full-time job in almost 3 years. She'd tried once, a candle business. She burned through $3,000 of our parents' money on jars, labels, and a branding shoot, then blamed me when it flopped. I was, according to her, negative energy. Apparently, negativity has become a convenient substitute for accountability. Meanwhile, I was working 2 jobs. Hospital RN by day, or night technically, and part-time at a clinic every other weekend just to keep myself afloat. And quietly, without telling anyone, I'd been paying Alyssa's rent for nearly 2 years. She had no idea. I'd set it up anonymously through the property manager when our parents hinted they couldn't help her anymore. Back then, I felt sorry for her. She was family. She was still figuring things out, as Mom liked to say, as if that was a respectable career path. I told myself I could handle the extra strain, that it was temporary, that I was doing the right thing. Standing there in my parents' kitchen, shoulders aching from lifting patients all night, I realized I was funding the survival of the person who resented me most in this world. "Marina, can you set the table?" Mom asked, already turning away before I answered. "Sure," I said, because that's what I always said. I walked past Alyssa, who didn't look up from her phone. I caught a glimpse of her screen, someone else's drama on TikTok she was live reacting to, little laughing, crying emojis flying up the screen. "Hey," I said softly. She glanced up, appraised me like I was some stranger in line at Starbucks, then smiled without warmth. "You look tired," she said. "Again." "Yeah," I replied. "Work will do that." She smirked. "You should try manifesting something softer. You're always in grind mode. No wonder you're so bitter." I swallowed the comeback sitting on my tongue and went back to stacking plates. Dinner started like it always did. Clinking cutlery, small talk. My parents acting like the past several years hadn't been held together by my credit card and my nervous system. Mom bragged about how she ran into her old Pilates friend. Dad made some vague comment about the economy and how nobody wants to work anymore, the irony of that almost making me choke. Alyssa did what Alyssa always did, took up space without contributing anything. She posted an Instagram story of the turkey with a caption like "family time," as if she wasn't seconds away from detonating the piece. Then, somewhere between the turkey and the pie, she perked up. "Okay," she said, placing her phone face down like she was about to deliver a TED Talk. "I have an idea." My stomach tightened. "Oh no," I thought. "Here we go." "Let's all go around," she said, eyes gleaming, "and say what we're not thankful for this year." Dad chuckled uncertainly. Mom gave that tight little laugh she used when she wanted something to seem harmless. I forced a small smile, waiting for the joke to land and pass. Come on, Alyssa insisted. It'll be fun. I'll go first. She looked straight at me. I'm not thankful, she said, clearly, slowly, for my jealous, jobless sister. The word hung there, heavier than anything I'd lifted on my shift. Jobless. There was a weird pause, like everyone at the table was waiting for the punchline that never came. My fork stalled halfway to my mouth. I looked at my parents. Mom blinked, then cleared her throat and went back to cutting her turkey, like if she just kept chewing, it would all disappear. Dad took a long sip of wine and stared at his plate. No one laughed this time. No one said, "That's not fair." No one said, "Hey, your sister literally keeps you from being homeless." Alyssa sat back in her chair, lips curled in satisfaction, like she'd just imparted some profound truth. The irony was suffocating. Jealous of what? Her unpaid credit cards? Her bar tab debt? The fact that her rent had been paid, month after month, by me, the same jobless sister she just humiliated at the dinner table? I felt heat rise to my face, my heart beating in my throat. For a split second, my mind played out an alternate version of the scene where I stood up and told everyone the truth, where I listed every month of rent, every secret payment, every sacrifice, where I watched Alyssa's expression crack in front of the people she was trying so hard to impress. Instead, I did what I'd been trained to do in this family. I laughed. It was short and brittle and didn't sound like me at all, but I laughed. I made it easy for them. I gave them permission to pretend it was just a joke. Wow, I said lightly. Tell us how you really feel. No one met my eyes. The rest of dinner blurred together in a haze of chewing and clinking and surface-level conversation. My body was at the table, nodding at the appropriate moments, making sure no one's glass went empty. My mind was elsewhere, watching the whole thing from the ceiling like it was a scene from a movie I'd seen too many times. No one asked if I was okay. No one pulled me aside. No one said, "That was out of line." By the time dessert was served, my smile felt like it had been stapled onto my face. When Mom asked if I could stay and help with dishes, I lied and said I had another shift early. I hugged her, hugged Dad, avoided Alyssa's gaze entirely, and walked out into the cold night air. The drive home was silent. No music, no podcast, just the sound of the tires humming against the road while Alyssa's words replayed in my head on a loop. Jealous, jobless, sister? I thought about the nights I'd stayed late at the clinic to earn enough to cover both my bills and hers. I thought about logging into that rental portal every month, heart pounding, but fingers steady, telling myself I was just helping until she got back on her feet. I thought about every time she'd called me boring for not going out. Every time she'd rolled her eyes at my scrubs. Every time she'd made me feel like I was somehow failing at life because mine wasn't aesthetic enough to post. By the time I walked into my apartment, I wasn't even angry. I was done. I set the sweet potato casserole leftovers on the counter, still wrapped in foil. I didn't bother turning on the TV. I sat at my small dining table, pulled out my laptop, and opened the browser like I was performing a surgery I'd rehearsed 1,000 times. I logged into the rental site. My heart was oddly calm as the dashboard loaded. I navigated to the account I'd created for Alyssa. There it was, her name, her address, the familiar number of her monthly rent, and beneath it, the auto pay I'd set up almost 2 years ago. My cursor hovered over the cancel button. I thought briefly about my parents' faces if they ever found out, about Alyssa's voice in my voicemail, wailing about life being unfair, about the way she'd looked at me across the turkey and said jobless like it was a slur. Then I remembered something Alyssa once told me during one of her many melodramatic moments. The worst feeling in the world is being ignored. Not hated, ignored. Maybe that was true. But as my finger pressed down on the trackpad and I clicked cancel, I realized there was something worse than being ignored. Being used. The system asked if I was sure. I clicked yes. No warning, no heads up, no gentle transition. She wanted to act like I was some bitter nobody? Fine. She could pay her own bills. If she could. 8 days passed before anything happened. 8 days where the silence wasn't peaceful. It was tense, expectant, like the pause between lightning and thunder. Alyssa hadn't noticed a thing. Why would she? In her world, bills paid themselves, groceries appeared magically, and rent was just another background task someone else handled. While she filmed soft life montages in her mirror, I worked double shifts that week, 2 nights in a row in the ER, then a clinic shift on Saturday. The contrast between my life and Alyssa's couldn't have been sharper. While she posed in front of latte art and captioned her photos "Abundance Mindset," I was unclogging feeding tubes and comforting families who were losing their world at 3 a.m. On the ninth day, the fallout began. It started with an unfamiliar voicemail. Property management. The words past due and immediate action required floated through the robotic tone. Then another call, this time a text from my mom. Have you heard anything about Alyssa's rent situation? She came home to an eviction notice today. I put my phone down. I stared at the wall. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel guilty either. Mostly I felt tired. Tired of being the invisible safety net she pretended didn't exist. A few minutes later, another voicemail. This one was Alyssa. Her voice was high-pitched, shaky, frantic. Marina, something's wrong with the rent, okay? There's a notice on my door. This is obviously a mistake. Can you do something, please? Actually, just call them. Fix it. I'm freaking out. Not can we talk, not I'm scared, not I'm sorry. Just fix it. I leaned back on my couch, hair still damp from the post-shift shower, and let her words play again like white noise. Outside, someone's dog barked twice. A car door slammed. Everyday life went on. Mine, finally, didn't revolve around her. Then came the group text. Alyssa's being evicted. Can we work together to figure this out? Mom. That was rich. Work together. There had never been a together. It had always been me, quietly holding back the tide while they all took turns complaining about the water. I stared at the message for maybe a full minute. Then I turned off my phone and went to bed. I slept harder than I had in weeks. 2 days later, another text came, this one from Alyssa. So you think this is funny? I replied immediately. I think it's fair. She didn't respond, but she saw it. Left me on red like she was dropping the mic. By the end of that week, she was officially out. The eviction went through. Her things, what she hadn't pawned or gifted to friends for clout, were dragged back to our parents' house. She arrived like some spoiled prodigal daughter, except instead of humility, she carried armfuls of entitlement and resentment. Mom welcomed her with open arms. Dad carried her bags. Alyssa walked in like a wounded queen returning from exile. And I finally breathed. No more rent payments. No more calendar reminders. No more juggling my own bills to cover hers. For the first time in 2 years, my bank account wasn't a hostage. I really thought that was the end of it. But entitled people don't stop when consequences hit. They pivot. The following Monday, I received a Venmo request. $150 Alyssa's exact rent. The note, just help for 1 more month. You can stop after this. I stared at the notification, not considering it, just stunned. There it was, the pure, unfiltered entitlement. Not even a scrap of apology, no acknowledgement, just a digital hand stretching out, palm up, like she was asking for a tip at a restaurant. I hit decline. That night, Mom called. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail, her tone wounded, like I had thrown a chair through her window. Marina, I don't know what's going on between you and your sister, but she's going through a hard time. If you could just help her out this one last time, we can all move on. We're family. I called her back. If you're so worried, you help her, I said. Then I hung up. An hour later, Dad called. I ignored it. Then came the texts, scripture quotes, passive-aggressive hints. Mom's favorite line, Alyssa is not perfect, but she's your only sister. Not one word about Thanksgiving, not one mention of what Alyssa said, not one apology. People love to skip to reconciliation when they were never the ones hurt, but I hadn't forgotten, and I wasn't done. 2 days later, Alyssa posted an Instagram story. A full-body mirror selfie in a coat I recognized. The one I bought her last Christmas after she cried about not having real winter clothes. Caption, unbothered, protected, moving higher while the jealous ones watch. I didn't react, didn't screenshot it, didn't feed the monster. But what came next wasn't petty, it was dangerous. I got called into HR. The woman across from me had the soft, neutral expression of someone paid not to show judgment. An anonymous complaint was submitted, she said, sliding a file across the desk. It alleges you verbally threatened a patient and created an unwelcoming environment. The words hit my chest like ice water. I opened the file. The dates didn't match my shifts. The alleged incident time was during a surgery I was assisting with, confirmed by cameras, charts, nurses. Garbage, pure fiction. And I knew exactly who had filed it. The HR rep said the complaint wouldn't hold, but the review had to be logged, documented, on my record. Something inside me shifted, a deep cold place opening like a door I didn't know existed. When I walked out of that meeting, I didn't text Alyssa, I didn't confront her, I didn't cry. I walked to my car in the garage, sat in the driver's seat staring at the dashboard, and felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just clarity. I pulled out my phone and blocked Alyssa. Then I blocked my parents. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was a quiet ending. The kind that happens mid-afternoon in a parking garage with cold coffee in your cup holder and exhaustion pressing into your bones. And in that stillness, I realized something. They had chosen their favorite child long ago. My mistake was pretending I didn't see it. This time, I wasn't going to be the bridge. I wasn't going to be the bank. I wasn't going to be the buffer. I was done. Truly, finally done. Blocking my family should have felt like slamming a door. Instead, it felt like setting down a weight I'd been carrying so long that I mistook it for part of my own body. Silence followed. Tense, loaded, temporary. I knew Alyssa too well. Her quiet wasn't peace. It was the inhale before the scream. It took only 72 hours for her to escalate. The first Venmo request came from someone named Ty, $150, helping Alyssa out while she gets back on her feet. I ignored it. The next was from Jada, $300, emergency rent, just this once. Then from Britt, $425, Alyssa said you'd help. 3 different names, 3 different profiles, all with Alyssa's signature entitlement baked into their phrasing. She was creating fake accounts, or recruiting strangers, or convincing friends to act as middlemen, anything to keep siphoning money from me. I didn't decline. I didn't respond. I simply left them pending, ghost requests floating in the void. The silence must have driven her insane, because the next escalation wasn't financial. It was personal. One night, after a long clinic shift, I was walking to my car when my phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. Just a photo. My car, parked behind the clinic, photo taken at night, headlights from some unknown car reflecting off the bumper. Then came the next message. Nice spot, would suck if anything happened to it. For a full 10 seconds, I just stared at the screen. No rush of panic, no spike of adrenaline. Just a cold, steady wave of realization. Alyssa wasn't trying to get money anymore. She was trying to get control. I didn't reply. I didn't even look around. I just unlocked my car, sat inside, and quietly filed a police report for harassment. I didn't name Alyssa. I didn't need to. But I sent the report to the precinct covering my parents' neighborhood. Small town, small gossip. A police cruiser rolling by their driveway at 9 a.m. would send the message better than any confrontation ever could. The next morning, I parked around the corner and watched from my rearview mirror as a squad car cruised slowly past my parents' house. No sirens, no knocking, just a slow roll, enough to nudge fear into the right minds. Alyssa wanted chaos? Fine. I wasn't going to play fire with fire. I was going to pull every thread she clung to until her entire safety net unraveled. The first thread, her rental history. Technically, Alyssa had still been on her apartment lease when she was evicted, and thanks to a drunken rant months ago, I never forgot. She'd let some guy from Bumble stay with her rent-free for a vibe, which counted as an illegal sublet. I called the leasing office, mentioned it casually. They opened an investigation. Within a week, Alyssa was hit with a $200 lease violation and was blacklisted from every property that management company owned. Thread 1, cut clean. Thread 2, her former boutique job. Years ago, Alyssa worked at a small fashion boutique for exactly 6 weeks. During that time, a stack of pricey jewelry accidentally went home with her. It was never returned. She loved using the boutique as a reference anyway. She loved looking polished on paper. I called the owner, someone I'd bought a necklace from years ago. Someone kind, someone patient, someone who had clearly been burned before. When I casually asked if she knew Alyssa was still using them as a reference, her tone changed immediately. Oh, she is? I thought we made it very clear after the incident. No, I was not aware. Thread 2 snapped. Alyssa must have felt the walls shifting around her because her social media turned manic. Story after story. Manifesting peace when people thrive on chaos. Protect your energy. Why do the worst people have the most power? She didn't tag me. She didn't have to. Her followers weren't as plentiful as she liked to believe. Her circle was shrinking. People were piecing things together. I started getting private messages from acquaintances. Hey, I didn't know what you were dealing with. Your sister's been asking everyone for money. It didn't feel right. We're sorry. It wasn't vindication. It wasn't victory. It was clarity. Alyssa had built her identity on the assumption that someone, me, would always catch her. Someone, me, would always be the safety net. Someone, me, would always let her walk across the rope barefoot while I bled for her. But that net was gone, and the fall was beginning. 2 full weeks passed with no word from Alyssa, my parents, or anyone connected to them. It felt like the longest exhale of my life. Then, just when I thought the quiet might last, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Later, during my lunch break, I played it. It wasn't Alyssa or my parents. It was a social worker. "Hi, Marina. I'm calling regarding an intake at our women's shelter. Your sister Alyssa has identified you as a source of emotional abuse and financial control." I paused the message so quickly I nearly dropped my phone. Alyssa had gone to a shelter, told them I abused her, said I was responsible for her eviction, positioned herself as a victim of my cruelty. It was so outrageous it almost felt surreal. But shelters operate on belief and safety first. They had to take her claims seriously. They had to follow up. I drove there the next morning. The director met me in a small office with soft lighting and an air purifier humming in the corner. I came with bank records, rent receipts, screenshots, harassment report, evidence of her subletting, evidence of the HR lie. The director listened, really listened. By the end, her expression had shifted from reserved professionalism to weary understanding. "She left yesterday morning," the director said, packed up one donated suitcase and walked out without saying a word. That was Alyssa. She burned bridges and then blamed the ashes for being so flammable. But the next twist came just days later. Debbie called. Debbie, my mom's best friend. The one who always smelled like peppermint gum and who never got involved. Her voice was low, shaky. "Marina, I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but your sister forged your signature." I felt the room tilt, not from shock, but from the inevitability of it. Debbie continued. "She tried to apply for a car loan using your name, said she was helping you out. The bank flagged it. They called my husband in fraud because something didn't match. Alyssa, my sister, trying to bind me legally to a car I didn't even know existed. A line had been crossed. No more web pulling, no more passive unraveling. This was criminal territory, and I needed to protect myself, not just emotionally or financially, but legally. I spent that night filing fraud alerts, freezing my credit, closing old accounts, documenting everything. Alyssa wasn't spiraling. She was digging, and I couldn't let her drag me down with her. 3 days after Debbie told me about the forged signature, I did something I hadn't done in months. I unblocked my parents. Not because I wanted reconciliation, not because I hoped they'd finally take my side. I called them for one reason only. I needed them to hear the truth from my mouth before Alyssa twisted it into another martyr story. My mom picked up on the second ring. "Marina?" She sounded cautious, like she wasn't sure if I was calling to scream or to beg. "Is everything okay?" "No," I said flatly. "Alyssa forged my signature." There was a thick pause, followed by that familiar, tired denial she'd perfected over 28 years of making excuses. She wouldn't do that. But I didn't stop. I didn't soften. I didn't take the gentler route like I always had. "Yes," I said. "She went into your garage, found old loan documents with my signature from college, copied it onto a car financing application, and tried to get approved under both our names." My mom inhaled sharply. My dad muttered something in the background, something like "Jesus Christ," but he didn't come to the phone. "I've frozen my credit," I continued, "filed a police report, and I sent the financial documentation to the precinct that covers your area." "Why would you do that?" my mom snapped. I almost laughed. "Because she committed a crime." Mom's voice rose, desperate, shaky. "Marina, please, she's going through a rough time. You know how emotional she gets. She tried to commit identity fraud. Emotional or not, that's not a rough time. That's a felony." "Don't say that. She's your sister." "She's an adult," I replied, "and adults face consequences." Silence again. A real, honest silence. The kind that only happens when denial finally cracks. "We'll talk to her," my dad finally said, voice low. "You need to do more than talk." I hung up before they could respond. That night, I locked down everything. Credit, accounts, passwords, phone backups. I printed out copies of every police report, every harassment screenshot, every Venmo request from fake accounts, every eviction notice, every photo she'd used to manipulate shelters and friends. I organized it all into a binder that said, "I'm not the one you get to rewrite anymore." I thought that would be the end of the chaos. But Alyssa wasn't done burning down her world. And this time, she caught our parents in the flames. It was early morning when I got another call from Debbie. She'd barely slept. You could hear it in her voice. "Your sister's being kicked out," she said. "Kicked out of where?" I asked. "Your parents' house." I blinked. "What happened?" "Oh, honey," Debbie sighed. "Where do I start?" She started at the beginning. Alyssa had turned our parents' house into chaos. She took over the guest bathroom, used the Wi-Fi to stream to her online followers at 2 a.m., left dishes piled high in the sink, stole groceries, left makeup stains on every towel, used my mom's credit card for Uber Eats, borrowed my dad's car for a quick errand, and returned it 3 hours later with a cracked taillight and a parking ticket. When they confronted her, she said they were controlling her healing. But the breaking point came at dinner. Alyssa brought up me again. How I sabotaged her life, how I ruined her reputation, how I weaponized money, how I gaslit her into trauma. She called my dad a coward for not confronting me. That did it. He slammed his fork down, stood up, and said the words neither of us thought we'd ever hear from him. Get out. She didn't believe him at first, but for once, he didn't back down. They didn't shout. They didn't argue. They just slipped a note under her door. You need to move out by December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas. And shockingly, Alyssa didn't fight, didn't negotiate, didn't throw a tantrum. She simply packed a few bags, walked out the next morning, and didn't say goodbye. The image was so surreal I had to sit down. Alyssa, getting consequences from them, not me. For the first time in our family's history, their golden child status cracked. And she walked right through it. But she wasn't heading toward rock bottom. Not yet. Before she left something else behind. A mess that wasn't physical. A mess I didn't see coming. 2 days after Alyssa left my parents' house, I got a message on LinkedIn from Marissa, a woman who once followed Alyssa on Instagram and met us briefly at a barbecue years ago. Hey, this is random, but your sister's been DMing people saying you financially abused her, ruined her job prospects, and that your workplace is investigating you. Just wanted to say I didn't believe her, but she's been loud. Loud. Of course she was. Alyssa didn't know how to hit bottom quietly. She had to drag everyone into the crater with her. But this time, she was shouting into an empty room. I wasn't going to let her rewrite the story in circles. Not anymore. So I called someone else. A woman Alyssa used to intern with at a fashion startup. Someone who'd once said Alyssa had potential, back before Alyssa ghosted shifts and walked out with free samples. Turned out that woman now worked at a hiring agency. I didn't bash Alyssa. I didn't rant. I simply said, she forged my signature on a car loan. I've filed the report. There was a long pause. Thank you for telling me, the woman said. We'll make sure that gets around. Small world. Smaller chances for Alyssa. By the end of the week, Alyssa posted 2 Instagram stories. First, blood doesn't mean loyalty. Family is who shows up when no one else does. Second, a mirror selfie in what looked like someone's basement. Bare mattress on the floor, string lights duct taped to the ceiling. Caption: sometimes you have to rebuild from rock bottom alone. For once, no filters, no makeup, no curated drama, just Alyssa in a borrowed space she was pretending was a rebirth. I watched it for 3 seconds, then scrolled past. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel vengeance. I just felt done. She wasn't my problem anymore. Not her lies, not her spirals, not her rebranding as a victim. For the first time, I understood something. I hadn't lost a sister. I'd simply stopped carrying someone who never wanted to walk. And the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was freedom. Christmas used to be a performance in our family, an annual theater production where everyone showed up with their assigned roles. Mom overcooked, Dad overpoured. Alyssa arrived an hour late, overdressed, full of opinions she never backed with action. I was always the glue, the quiet helper, the one who filled in emotional and financial gaps so no one else had to. This year, for the first time in my adult life, my role changed. There was no script for me to follow, no casserole to bring, no obligatory smile to plaster on despite exhaustion. I spent Christmas alone, not lonely, alone. I ordered pad thai, turned off all notifications, watched Zodiac on my couch with a fuzzy blanket and a cheap bottle of wine. The radiator clicked every so often like a companionable metronome. For the first time in years, the quiet didn't feel like punishment. It felt clean. Alyssa had been kicked out 3 days before Christmas, and it didn't happen in the dramatic reality TV-style meltdown people always imagined with her. No screaming, no slammed doors, no emotional speeches delivered through tears. She just left. According to Debbie, she took a few bags, grabbed her ring light, and walked out like she was heading to another healing retreat. Left behind dirty dishes in the sink, towels with makeup smudges, and a house full of tension my parents had finally stopped swallowing. The final argument, the one that pushed her out for good, was about me. At dinner, Alyssa claimed I had ruined her entire life, sabotaged her career, blacklisted her from apartments, and weaponized money to control her. Dad had apparently told her to stop. Alyssa, never one to surrender the spotlight, accused him of being a coward, just like Marina. He told her to move out by December 23rd. She left on the 22nd. She ended up moving in with some girl she barely knew from Instagram, someone who ran a page about chosen family energy and protecting your peace from toxic bloodlines. They connected instantly, trauma bonding, or fantasy bonding, over grievances they'd curated like mood boards. The basement she relocated to was aesthetic adjacent. Crystal lamps, fake plants, 3 ring lights, and a tapestry that probably came from a discount store. I know all of this because Alyssa posted a story from her new home. Just a bare mattress on the floor beneath a string of fairy lights. Caption: sometimes you have to rebuild from rock bottom alone. There was no apology, no recognition of her part in anything. And strangely, that's when I knew she wasn't done. Because Alyssa's bottom was never where she landed. It was wherever she decided she had been pushed. 2 days later, I got a DM from an old account of hers that I hadn't blocked. 8 words. Hope you're happy. You ruined everything. I read it twice. Not because it hurt, but because it was so profoundly empty, so predictable, so Alyssa. She truly believed that her downfall was something done to her, not something she'd built with the same hands she used to beg, blame, and brand herself a victim. I blocked that account too and went back to eating my leftovers. That's when things shifted. Not because of her, because of me. The guilt I had been raised to carry, daughter guilt, sister guilt, caretaker guilt, was gone, truly gone. For the first time, my decisions weren't defensive, they were protective. A few days after Christmas, I checked my email and saw a message from a recruiter I'd reached out to months earlier. A nursing position had opened at a clinic closer to home. Better hours, better pay, fewer night shifts. They wanted to schedule an interview. It felt symbolic, like life was finally offering me something that wasn't a burden. I took it as a sign, a quiet promise that my life could start belonging to me again. I accepted the interview immediately. A week passed without another word from Alyssa or my parents. Then Debbie called again. Her voice carried something heavy. Pity, maybe, or resignation. "Your sister keeps talking," she said softly. "She's telling people on social media you abandoned her, that you're unstable, that you're under investigation at work." I closed my eyes. Of course. Alyssa couldn't stand having the narrative slip from her hands. And if there's one thing she loves more than attention, it's a villain to blame. "She's also saying you emotionally abused her," Debbie continued, trying to get sympathy. "You know how she is." I did, better than anyone. But none of what Debbie said bothered me, because her words confirmed something I'd been feeling for weeks. She wasn't my responsibility anymore. Her crisis wasn't my crisis. Her lies weren't my truth. I had finally stepped out of the role she'd cast me in. Caretaker, savior, scapegoat. She was performing for an audience that was shrinking by the day, while I was building a life without her. My interview went well. They offered me the position. Better schedule, better benefits, a fresh start. When I signed the paperwork, something in my chest unclenched. I moved into a new apartment across town. Small but sunlit, quiet, with a balcony that overlooked the streetlights instead of the shadows I'd lived under. I didn't send the address to anyone. Not even my parents, not even Alyssa's ex-boyfriend, who had shown up weeks earlier with a box of childhood photos and a cryptic apology. I kept it for myself. My parents never called. Maybe they were embarrassed. Maybe exhausted. Maybe relieved that they no longer had to pretend their daughter's chaos was manageable. Whatever the reason, the silence didn't hurt. It felt like healing. On my first morning in the new apartment, I stepped onto my little balcony with a mug of coffee. The air was cold enough to sting my cheeks, but it felt good. Bracing, honest, a reminder that fresh starts don't always feel warm at first. My phone buzzed once, a calendar notification, not a message from anyone in my family, just a reminder to confirm my onboarding paperwork. I smiled. Alyssa once told me the worst feeling in the world was being ignored. Not hated, not yelled at, ignored. I remember that now because she finally got what she feared most. And I finally got what I never believed I'd have. Not revenge, not justice, not vindication. Peace. Earned. Quiet, mine. And I wasn't giving it up for anyone,